Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's virtual program with Turnstile Tours. My name is Andrew Gustafson, and I want to welcome you on this Veterans Day to the Brooklyn Navy Yard Center at Building 92, which we're going to be exploring. Because today is not only Veterans Day, it is also the 10th anniversary of the opening of this museum, visitors, and employment center for the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Really the first kind of public gateway for the yard to tell the story of its past, present, and future, and really connect with the community. So today we're going to talk about how Building 92 got started, and we're going to look at the collections and the exhibits, and how Building 92 and the programming and exhibitions at the Navy Yard continue to tell this now 220-year-old story of the yard. So we're going to look at some of the highlights as we make our way through the museum in just a couple of minutes. It's not just going to be me speaking, because I wanted to welcome my fellow Turnstile Tour staff members and longtime Brooklyn Navy Yard tour guides. In fact, we have maybe the longest tenured Navy Yard tour guide, Cindy, who actually started off the tour program back in 2008. And we're also joined by Doug, who's been leading tours of the yard now for, is it 9 years now, Doug, since 2012?
I'll trust your math before I trust mine, Andrew, but yeah, something like that. I think 9 is correct.
Yeah, so we're gonna step inside in just a minute, and we're gonna kind of have a conversation. So we want to encourage people to ask questions throughout the program, and also share memories. I know we have a lot of people from the staff of the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation who are joining us today, many of whom have been involved in the exhibits and programs over the years at the yard. So please feel free to drop those things into the chat, and we'd love to hear from you. And also just a reminder that we do have closed captioning available. You can turn it on or off down at the bottom of your screen.
Andrew, Andrew, I just wanted to share, for those of you that are tuning in and have personal connections, please do put that in the chat. It may be hard for Andrew to see what you're sharing, but Doug and I are here. We want to make this a conversation, really celebrate this anniversary. We do have a longtime staff member at the Navy Yard, Kina, is joining from Physical Services and Programs. And Elizabeth McGordy, who we had on from the archives. So we're happy to have you, as well as many other people that have connections. So let's have a lively chat and conversation as we go along.
Yeah. So today, what we're going to talk about is, we're going to talk about kind of the project of bringing this building to life, because as you'll see, it's a combination. It's an adaptive reuse project of a historic building, as well as new construction, really. At the time, a very, very innovative building to house this visitor center. We're going to talk about the museum exhibit and kind of how that came together and the story that it tells. And we're going to talk about the collections as well. So what does the Navy Yard, as Cindy mentioned, the archives, so kind of what do we have here on site that helps to tell the story of the yard. And then we'll also talk about, ideas for the future. As 10 years is a long time to have an exhibition up. And so we've all seen the changes here over the last now 13 years that we've been working at the Navy Yard. And so we'll talk about how the exhibition has evolved, and the programming has evolved and will continue to evolve to tell that past, present, and future story. Because it's not just about the future or the present. We also are learning all the time more and more about the past of the yard, things that we didn't know 10 years ago. So those are some of the things that we're going to talk about. I want to start just quickly here in the forecourt. So I'm facing Flushing Avenue with the Building 92 behind me. But we do have a couple really neat and notable things that we can show you here that really are part of the exhibition as well. So the first thing I want to show you is these benches, and we'll get in closer here. But as I said, a lot of Building 92 is an adaptive reuse project. It was about taking a historic building that had been totally abandoned and turning it into something new and giving it new life. And so there's a lot of recycled materials that have gone into Building 92, including these benches right here. These are actually made from teak that was salvaged from the USS North Carolina, which was built here at the yard in 1940 and is today a museum ship down in Wilmington, North Carolina. So they got these and turned them into our benches. I'm going to flip my camera around because behind those benches, I want to show you a really, really important part of the exhibition here, especially on a day like today, Veterans Day. And that is our tribute wall. And so the tribute wall, as people generously donated to have these panels put up that commemorate different people with connections to the Navy or to the military in general, or to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, both on the military and the civilian side. And so it's a really great testament to the support for this project, but also, tells the story of, and I recognize so many of the names. Many of these people have been on our tours, or their family members have been on our tours. And many of these people who are on here also, their stories are also preserved in our oral history collection as well. Cindy, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was hoping you could move in a little bit closer so we can have a closer look.
Sure. Sorry.
So here we see on the left-hand side, Daniela Romano.
Yeah.
A plank owner, and she was really a driving force to bring this visitor center to life in the early days.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that when we get closer to the building. And yeah, Daniela was really instrumental in bringing this place to life. Let's see a couple more. I don't know if we have anybody who's on the program who maybe recognizes any of these names, or maybe we're donors. But yeah, but there's one other panel that I want to show folks, which is also really significant, and something that we had the great honor to be involved with in a small way. And this is this one right here. Here. Okay, so as some of you may know, kind of the darkest day in the history of the Brooklyn Navy Yard was December 19th, 1960. And that's when the USS Constellation, which was an aircraft carrier under construction here, caught fire. And that accident killed 50 workers, which was the deadliest accident in the yard's history. Now, the Constellation did go into service, and it served more than 40 years in the U.S. Navy. And throughout that time, there was a plaque inside the ship on the hangar deck that listed the names of all the Brooklyn Navy Yard workers who were killed. At some point, that plaque disappeared between the decommissioning and the scrapping of the Constellation. In the early 2000s. It was decommissioned in 2004, if I'm not mistaken, and scrapped in 2012. At some point, that plaque disappeared. And so the Alumni Association of the USS Constellation decided that they wanted to recreate this plaque, which they were able to do from some photographs, and they had the names of the people that were killed. So they commissioned a replica to be made, and they approached the Brooklyn Navy Yard to have it hang here. Since the Constellation is no longer afloat, this seemed like the most appropriate place to put this memorial up. And so many of those veterans, as well as people who had worked on the Constellation, were there during the fire, and the family members of some of the people who were killed actually came here. And we had a commemoration ceremony, and they hung up this plaque. We'll get back to that original plaque a little bit later on in the tour, but I just want to note this. This is actually something that folks can come and see, because the gate at the front of Building 92 is usually open right here on Flushing Avenue. So you can come in and take a look at the tribute wall and the Constellation Memorial here. Yeah. So I just wanted to highlight that for folks. We did a program about the Constellation, but we did that from home, so I didn't get a chance to show the plaque to people in the location. Yeah, but I want to just show a little bit of the outside of the building, and then we will head inside. Sound good, guys?
Sounds good, Andrew.
Okay. I'm sort of the host and camera person today, but okay, so here we go. So now you get a nice view here. So this is the original Building 92, built in 1857, designed by architect Thomas Ustick Walter, who at the time was actually the architect of the United States Capitol. And the building was in really rough shape. And maybe we can pull up that picture, Cindy. We have a picture of what it looked like in 2008, when kind of the idea of turning this into a museum and visitor center was born. So this is the same view. I'm standing in the same location as we're seeing. You can see it has no windows. The roof was partially caved in. It was completely abandoned and gutted. The advantage that this building had was, one, it was a historic building, definitely deserving of preservation. It was built in 1857 as the Marine Commandant's residence. So the commander of the detachment of Marines based here at the Navy Yard lived in this house. So it was a historic building. Number two, it was on a public street. So it was easily accessible to the public. So that made it a good candidate to turn into a visitor center, but it's not a very big building. And so what they decided to do was build this addition to it. So this is the new Building 92, which is emblazoned on the side with this beautiful solar screen, which shows a picture of the launching of the USS Brooklyn there.
Andrew,
yeah.
I think it's really important to mention too the context and the significance of actually having a building that the public could go to from the street, from outside the Navy Yard, because prior to this point in time, you had the secure perimeter, which is absolutely necessary for an industrial park. But if you wanted to go and see if there was a job available, you would have to go through security. So the fact that this opened up in a public space and place, opening up right into the neighborhood was very significant in terms of sending that message of welcome to people that lived in the surrounding community and to just general members of the public who were curious.
And that's so important too, as you mentioned, the employment center, because there's been an employment center at the Yard since the early 90s. But up until 10 years ago, that was located at Building 292, way deep within the Yard. So you had to go through security. You had to get a ride that would take you way out to this building. So it was really inaccessible. So we're going to talk a lot about the museum today, but the employment center is just as important, and making that readily accessible was one of the key goals of this. And also all of the other programming that's done here. You know, this has been the hub for, K-12 programs at the Yard for years as well. So having this gathering place was really, really important. And as we look towards the future of the Yard, we're seeing more and more of that. The Yard is sort of pushing the gates back and opening up more public spaces, like Building 77, for example, which is just a little bit further east down Flushing Avenue. So we're going to go inside here, but I saw Elizabeth had a comment.
Yes, she did. So Elizabeth mentioned, she said when this project was undertaken, it was always described as a gateway to the community. One other thing that I have at times, shared with the public when we visited Building 92 or started the tours there, is it was really this concept of cradle to career, this idea that if young people that live in the surrounding community and their families, I'm going to remove my picture here so we can see you entering the space. But if young people and their families really can get to know the Navy Yard and learn about the significance of the site, both its history and contemporary story, and the resources that are available there, then maybe there'll be a likelihood that they'll participate in school programming, and then later on internships, and maybe even step inside to go to the employment center and ask about jobs. So there's sort of that connection. It's sort of building relationships and familiarizing people with the important resource that the Navy Yard is.
And that's something that reminds me of a story. The building itself has a lot of green design features, a lot of ecological technologies integrated into the structure of the new building. And it's always struck me as important to recognize that one of the important ecological features of the building is in fact the employment center, which is focused on providing good jobs for people in the neighborhood, and in Brooklyn itself and in New York, and recognizing the economic component of ecological sustainability is something that this building quite intentionally does, which has always been a nice
That's a great point, Doug. I mean, I think this was really founded during a period of time when that environmental sustainability was a big focus of the Yard. And of course it still is, but we've sort of pushed the meaning of what is sustainability. How do we have sustainable communities beyond just thinking about it from that environmental lens? So that's a great point. What makes a sustastainable community? Yep. Yeah, exactly. So
what is that behind you, Andrew? Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So we're here now in the atrium.
Is that a leftover rabbit costume from Halloween? Somebody's
yeah. So this is one of the sort of prize artifacts of the collection here. This is the anchor of the USS Austin, which was one of the last ships built at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, built in 1965. Like the Constellation, it has also been scrapped, but they managed to rescue the anchor from it and get it here from Brownsville, Texas, and install it here. So it's really become sort of an important symbol of the of Building 92. Here you can see this actually comes from a short film that was made by Meredith Kaufman Younger when they were moving the anchor. And so here you can see it being lifted off that flatbed truck that brought it to the yard and taking it to GMD to be cleaned up and painted and stuff before it was installed here. So little piece of yard history, though interestingly, not actually made here at the yard. We did not make anchors and chains at the yard, at least not in the 20th century. So this actually comes from Chester, Pennsylvania. It was made by the Balt Anchor and Chain Company, which made a lot of anchor and chain for the U.S. Navy for over 70 years. And so here, we can also see, this is where kind of the new building meets the old building in here. We have another important artifact, which I'll show. Turn this here. So you can see there is one of our eagles. That there are actually a few eagles around the yard. This one used to be over at the Sand Street Gate. The eagle is kind of the unofficial symbol of Brooklyn. You find these tremendous eagles all over the place, like in the Brooklyn Public Library. A newspaper used to be called the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, and these used to guard the gate at the Sand Street Gate over on the west side of the yard. But there used to be two. Only one has survived. So we'll take
Andrew,
a closer look at it. Yep.
I wanted to give two shout outs. One, sure. I want to give a shout out to Kina, who's watching, who did a series during the pandemic with artists at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, where she interpreted the history of different stories of the Navy Yard and artifacts. And then artists used those artifacts as inspiration. And so one of them was actually this eagle. And it's an excellent, if you have kids at home and they're wanting to learn to draw and or learn about the history of the Navy Yard, it's called Creative History. You can find it on the Brooklyn Navy Yard's website. And then I also wanted to share Adrian Murray, who was one of the longtime staff members. She was there when the visitor center opened. I always loved her story about growing up in the neighborhood and being a little afraid of the eagles at the gate, and then realizing that she had an eagle over her shoulder once she started working at building that. She had one of the eagles that when she was a child, she was kind of afraid of.
That's great, and I just want to add that you know, this story, what we're sharing today, it's really about people. There were so many people who were critical to the success of this project over the last, you know, actually not 10 years, but it was several years before that. I'm just going to say that we are going to forget people, so I'm just going to apologize up front. But yeah, so it really was an incredible effort to, you know, basically create a new museum and tell the story of this place in a way that's, you know, honors the history, but also looks towards the present day story of the yard and the future. And one thing that's been so important to Building 92 and just kind of the public programming at the Navy Yard in general is that places like this and tours and public programs have really drawn people out of the woodwork. People who had personal connections here now had a place to come and share their stories, share their family artifacts, and have those things be documented and preserved. And so that's one of the things we're going to talk about as we make our way through the exhibits as well. All right, so we're going to step now into the first floor gallery.
Maybe it would be great to know who has been to the museum. If you want to put in the chat, if you've been to the museum before, or if this is your first time visiting, so to speak.
Yeah, and speaking of people, I know it's maybe a little bit hard to read, but you know, this is basically the credits or the masthead for Building 92 from 10 years ago, and lots of colleagues and friends listed on here. But Cindy, you know, we talked about how this sort of started around 2008, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you first got involved with the Navy Yard.
Yeah, sure. So in the early days, you know, the Brooklyn Navy Yard, I mean, not early days, but like the early days of conceiving of this visitor center and public engagement in this way. You know, there was an archivist at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, Daniela Romano, and then several staff members that were kind of supporting this effort. And the Brooklyn Navy Yard is you know, operates this industrial facility. And so at that time, they thought that building partnerships with different organizations would help them facilitate the design of the exhibition, thinking about the visitor experience. And so that's really when initially, I believe I was initially involved through the Brooklyn Historical Society. So the Brooklyn Historical Society had partnered up with the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation to bring on historians and experts to really think about what the exhibition would look like. And we were brought on at that time by Brooklyn Historical Society and the Navy Yard to start doing tours on a monthly basis, in part to try to connect with people that had personal stories that connected with the Navy Yard. So that we could collect those oral histories. There was an ongoing oral history project that had started around that time that Jennifer Egan, the author who wrote Manhattan Beach, was also involved with. And so there was a lot of energy around research and collecting stories at that time. And so that's how I was initially involved, as well as with the school programs. So we started out before doing school programs by bringing all kinds of teachers from the surrounding schools and neighborhoods to kind of just look at the resources that we had and what they thought would be useful in the classroom. And so that's how the initial relationship was started. And it was really at that time that we were starting a tour company. And so that's, and then there was like another organization, the Brooklyn Center for the Urban Environment, which no longer exists, but they were brought on board to really think about the story of sustainability at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And then I think it was shortly after the museum opened, they ended up closing their doors. And so the interpretation was no longer segmented out and was all brought in to tell one big kind of story about the past, present, and future. And really, like, the space that you're standing in was always conceived to be an exhibition about the past, present, and future. It's in the name.
Yeah. And of course, it's, it was sad to lose an institution like the Brooklyn Center for the Urban Environment, but it did bring us Aisha Glover, who then came and joined the team at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And we had the opportunity to work with her for a long time, and she really helped shepherd the tour program along with many other people here, and now has gone on to do tremendous things in the city of Newark. And so that's another person I want to give a shout out to. But yeah, so we're here in the timeline gallery. And, behind me, you can see, on the lower portion, we have a timeline of notable events in the yard's history, but also in Brooklyn's history. So the idea was to put it into a broader context of Brooklyn and especially the waterfront. And then up top, we can see the mural painted by a Navy Yard artist named Mason Nye that shows many of the ships that were built here at the yard. Just a little bit of context for those who don't know, the Brooklyn Navy Yard was established in 1801 and was operated as a naval shipyard from 1801 until 1966. And over the course of those 165 years, it built about 130 ships for the US Navy. So its primary mission was actually modernization, repair, and outfitting of Navy ships, not actual construction, although we did build a number of notable ships, which we can see on the timeline here. So I'll flip my camera around. There you go. How does that look, Sin?
Looks good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep. So you can see the kind of evolution from sail and wood to steam to iron and steel, and many of the notable ships that were built here in the 20th century as well. So here we can see the USS Arizona, sort of in the center of that panel right there. And as we go further down, we can see the USS Missouri. And one thing I love about the mural is that it actually extends beyond the Navy period, because from 1969 to 1979, Sea Train Shipbuilding was here at the yard, and they built crude oil super tankers, which Andrew, you can see that black and red vessel. Yep.
Bob Levine was just sharing the story, which you mentioned earlier before the program with me, about his mother, who was working at the Navy Yard during the Second World War, so the era of the USS Missouri, right there. One of the first women to be employed at the Navy Yard at a point when there was a significant number of female employees, many of them working as welders. And Bob, feel free to drop in the chat or Andrew, maybe what Mrs. Levine was working on.
I'm not sure, Bob, what your mother Sidonia, what her rating was in the Navy Yard. But yeah, that's something that we'll also take a closer look at when we get up to the third floor.
Okay.
Because we'll take a look at the oral histories that are on display, and was really, as we were saying before, really integral to the interpretation was the collection of these oral histories. I'm going to flip around again. All right, so this is the potion table, and so this was designed by a company called Potion, which coincidentally within the last few months has actually moved into the Navy Yard. They were based in Manhattan, and they're now a tenant at the yard, and this is one of their this is a long-standing installation. This has been here now for 10 years, and what you're looking at is that you may think that this is like an LCD screen, or what this actually is a projection. So there are projectors up above the table, and so how you sort of manipulate it is that it reads the shadows. So I'll select something, and we can see something pops up. Here we go. So there you go. You can see this doesn't get used all that often now. Here we go, building 92. You're here. It's like a little off center a little bit, but what we're going to see in just a second.
And Andrew,
you can see this. Yeah.
I just wanted to point out, like, we can kind of see it going, now it's disappearing across the bottom of the screen, but there's actually.
Yeah, it's going to change in 3, 2, 1, go. So what this shows is 400 years of of the Wallabout Bay.
Just a little bit before we started giving tours, just a couple.
Yeah, just a little bit. So yeah, and so one thing I love about the potion table is that this was something very much created out of the collection here at the yard. Now, people ask us all the time, including a tour I gave yesterday, which is, what, do we have records of people that worked here at the yard? And the answer is no. The collection is made up of a few things. One of the key ones being 40,000 maps and architectural drawings that the Navy left behind. So when the Navy left the yard in 1966, they decommissioned it. They basically took all the records with them, except for they did not need maps and blueprints of buildings that they did not own anymore. So they left those behind, and those maps and blueprints were used to create this time-lapse map that shows the evolution of the landscape over time. So this is very much drawn from these primary sources that are still held and have been meticulously digitized over the last many years. And so this what I love about this map is that it's really a reflection of that collection. And you're going to see in we'll hold on here until we get to World War II. You can see the yard growing in the early 20th century. We're about to enter the World War I era. But when we get to World War II is when you'll really see the yard sort of take the shape that it has today. What we still see over here is actually, this is not the Navy Yard. This is the Wallabout Market, which was a wholesale food market, one of the largest in the world. Over here, we can see the Brooklyn Naval Hospital, which is now part of Steiner Studios, although many of the historic buildings are still intact. But in just a second, you're going to see kind of how the entire shoreline of the yard was transformed during World War II. We do a World War II focus tour of the yard, and it really, the reason why we do it is because it was such a transformative period in the yard's history. Not only was it very busy, we went up to 70,000 workers and built and repaired more than 5,000 vessels, but also because the physical plant really changed, and so much of the infrastructure that we have today at the yard dates to that period of time. So you're going to see it in just a second. There you go. So you see the entire shoreline change. They extended the piers sort of further out into Wallabout Bay, built 2 new dry docks, which you can see here. And so this is basically the shape that the yard takes today. They're just a few buildings that we don't have anymore, and there are new ones that we've built that aren't reflected in this map today. Here we can see the Hammerhead Crane. It's moving. If you follow by the timer that's going around, these ships are moving incredibly slow. It takes them years to get out of the yard. And here we can see the fire on the Constellation in 1960 reflected there as well. So you also see fires in buildings at different points in time, and then they'll disappear from the map. So yeah, it also reflects not just sort of snapshots in time, but important historical events as well. So really cool. And one of you, Cindy or Doug, you got to give a tour of the yard for the potion team and play around with this table with them, right?
Yes, actually, they, since they moved into the Navy Yard, they wanted to do a tour with their staff as they were coming back to the office. And it was thrilling for them to see that this table is still going strong. It's an older kind of technology. They've now, of course, over the past 10 years, been able to adapt how they do large format interactives. But they were excited to see that it's endured all this time, for sure.
All right.
It's a really popular point. I love standing around there with school kids. One of the games that they like to play is waiting for their birthday to come around on the timeline. Everyone celebrates when in the later years. But that's a good point, Andrew, that it takes 3 years for a ship to get out of Wallabout Bay. I never.
Yeah.
It's really amusing.
So now we're in a gallery. So the timeline gallery kind of sets the stage for the yard's history, and now we're in the today's yard gallery, the yard of today and the yard of tomorrow, and really reflects the businesses of the yard today. And this is one that's changed over time. So you can see the case on the right. They've updated in the last 10 years as we've added more tenants to the yard, and new products, new industries have come into the yard. But still, the focus is really on creative industries, technology, and manufacturing. And so on the right, you can see some of the products that are made here in the yard. And then on the left is a series of photographs that have been here for 10 years that were done by a yard tenant named Robert Clark, of the people that make things here in the yard. And so this was updated just a couple of years ago. And I love that it sort of reflects different sectors. So here we can see, tilt down a little bit, you can see food and beverage with Kings County Distillery and Russ and Daughters and Rooftop Reds, the maritime industry with the NYC Ferry, you can see down in the bottom right, the film and television industry up in the top left, with the poster for The Greatest Showman, which was filmed here back in 2015, I think. And then a lot of art pieces as well. So, the yard in total has about 450 businesses. If I have my up-to-date numbers, about 11,000 people that come to work here every day. And there's close to 100 artists that are here at the yard as well. So really, really diverse community. And the yard is really, its mission is to help support these small businesses, entrepreneurs, and keep good quality, well-paying manufacturing, industrial, and creative jobs here in New York City. But I'll come around here. Get a look at this side. Yeah. But Cindy and Doug, anything in here notable, any of these objects or images that you like to talk about when you give tours in 92?
Well, Michelle Green is right in front of you, the welder. She does wonderful work and offers welding workshops for different special occasions throughout the year. Valentine's Day welding workshops, sort of father-son, father-daughter events to get people together. It's a really wonderful thing, a rare opportunity to get inside and learn a skill. And she makes these absolutely exquisite pieces of furniture that are replicable, so they're a little bit designed, but also unique enough to sort of fit into the art category as well. And
and here you can see her working on this throne that she built, and there's a version of this, or is this the one?
No, it's that.
It's that one that's in the subway.
Yeah,
on the one train.
Yes, near Columbia University.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also taught welding out in California, and she's quite a powerhouse of an individual. And the welding that she does is exquisite. Like the quality of the joins is it's kind of gobsmacking.
And one other thing too is that Michelle, so much of her work, she's been at the Navy Yard for I think about 25 years, has incorporated scraps of metal that would otherwise go to a junkyard into her work. So that's kind of historical pieces, literally tiny pieces of metal that are like integrated into her sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is Trevor McDermott, who I bumped into the other day in the yard, and he runs a company called Underground Signs, and they make replica subway signs. So if you want a subway sign for your apartment, he has a license from the MTA to use their fonts and logos and colors and stuff. They're very litigious about who uses their colored circles. So, but he's built a business out of that, and now does other types of graphic arts and creating these signs. I mean, there's so many things that we can look through in here, but we have 2 more floors to go through. So why don't we head upstairs to the 2nd floor? And so we sort of have the overview of the timeline gallery. We have the today's yard, which is today's yard. And then as we get to the 2nd floor, it's really the 19th century story of the yard.
So while you're walking, we can sort of update people on Bob's mother's participation in the history
Oh
of
yeah.
the yard. Um, the Shipworker is a publication that was published regularly, and you can often find stories about individuals who worked at the Navy Yard. And apparently, she took classes at Manhattan College for drafting, um, and was able to read the blueprints and make new drawings from others or patterns. And so that there was a which building was that? Building 5, where the drafting offices were.
Yeah, there was drafting offices in 5 and 3 and 77.
So it was a big department within the Navy Yard as those individuals
Yeah.
working.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Doug.
Yep.
So we're here on the second floor, and I just want to show you a couple things around here. So one is we have this large diagram of a wooden sailing ship. So this is really about the age of sail. And it's one of my favorite little corners of the yard right here, because it's really about the craft of shipbuilding, of shipwrights. And so we have a few different tools that are on display for making ships and sails and woodworking. And we have this giant, I'm just going to step back here, this giant crosscut saw right here, as well as some other tools that were used in the shipwright trade, including, I think it's in here, we have all of this oakum, which is what was used to actually make ships watertight. So one of the jobs was called being a caulker, so it actually caulk between the boards. So there were all of these skills that were here in the 19th century for wooden shipbuilding. But the thing about the yard is that it spans such a huge period of time that shipbuilding technology and techniques changed dramatically over the course of the yard's history, especially in the 19th century, as we transition, away from making wooden ships with sails to then making iron ships that are powered by steam. So it required all new technology, all new skills, all new machinery. And so what's really neat about the landscape of the yard itself is that you can see these layers of these different eras as different buildings were built for different purposes, and then their purposes adapted over time. So that's kind of the story that they tell here in this corner of the gallery, and also a lot about what was the yard up to basically before the time of the Civil War. And I'll show you, we have a few great ship models here in the exhibit. This is one. This is actually the first ship built at the Brooklyn Navy Yard from start to finish. This is the Uss Ohio, which was built between 1817 and 1820. Yeah.
Where is the Ohio now, Andrew?
Actually, Cindy and I have gone looking for the Ohio. So in the 1880s, it was sold off and actually burned to the waterline in Greenport Harbor. And so pieces of it are sitting down at the bottom of Greenport Harbor. A professor, I want to say from Stony Brook, has done some dives down to it and recovered some of the artifacts that have survived, namely the metal, some of the metal parts, some copper pins and things like that have been recovered. And they actually have a picture of it right here. Let's see. That is the figurehead of the Ohio, which is still around, and it's on display in Stony Brook, I think. Yeah.
Andrew, one of the programs that we did, I think it was earlier this year, or maybe it was last year, it's all becoming a blur, but was about a building that's recently been renovated and restored by the Brooklyn Navy Yard, where wooden boat building sort of continued on past this sort of age of sail. A lot of times we think about sort of that transition from wood to iron to steel, but in fact, wooden boat building continued throughout the entire history of the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Yeah, that's right. So building 127, which is recently redeveloped and has tenants moving into it now. Yeah, it was built in 1905, so well after the end of the age of sail. But they built wooden boats because steel battleships still needed lifeboats and launches and things like that, and so you needed to maintain those wooden boat building skills. And eventually that moved. There used to be a building over on the far east side of the yard that was used for wooden boat building. Yeah, so a lot of these skills continue on. A lot of those skills still exist today in the yard, but there are people making furniture, millwork, artwork, stuff like that. And so there's a lot of similar skills that are still done. And I think one important story of the yard today is about this kind of marriage of advanced technology and traditional handcrafts that so many of the businesses here embody. I wanted to mention this display right here because this is not the first museum at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. The first museum was actually the Brooklyn Lyceum, which the building is no longer standing. It was torn down in 1910, I believe. But the Lyceum was founded in 1833 as really a center of higher learning for junior officers in the Navy. The Navy had been a very kind of stodgy institution, very hereditary, was not open to new ideas. And so a group of young officers here at the Yard decided to create their own kind of institution to gather and kind of push these new ideas, new scientific discoveries, and get civilians involved as well. And so they had a museum here at the Yard, and they also had a publication called the Naval Magazine, which actually promoted the first building the first steam-powered ship for the U.S. Navy, which took until 1837, good 30 years after the technology had been pretty well established. And that article was written by Matthew Perry, who was the commandant and played a lot of important roles here at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, but also another important part in our history of kind of innovation and also education, because we have so many educational partnerships here at the Yard. Some of you may have seen in our newsletter or read in the news that Pratt Institute is moving a number of its research laboratories into Building 3 right next door, which is the building that the three of us work in. And there are also partnerships with many other institutions, including, City Tech, Long Island University, and of course we have a career and technical education high school here called the Brooklyn STEAM Center. So that tradition of educational, of learning here at the Yard really goes back to these days of the Lyceum. So I want to highlight that here. But I know we have a lot of things to see and very little time left. So again, some more of our ship models. Here we have a ship model of the USS Monitor, which is a beautiful little model, and the Monitor did come here to the Yard. I just say it's probably one of the biggest misconceptions about the Yard is that the USS Monitor was built here. It was built a couple miles up the river in Greenport at the Continental Iron Works. So I understand why it's important to have this model here to tell the story sort of the transition and how it was to iron shipbuilding, but
Andrew,
there's still a lot of confusion. Yeah.
Andrew, just to clarify, it's Greenpoint, up in Greenpoint.
Oh, what did
right?
I say? Sorry.
Greenport.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. We were just talking about
okay.
Greenport. We were talking about the USS Ohio. Yeah. Greenpoint. Yeah. Continental Iron Works at the Bushwick Inlet. I also want to show this little display right here, which is one of my favorites, but one that's often gets overlooked. And it tells the story of the Naval Hospital, and they're sort of displayed on these sort of gurneys, which is what they're made to look like, or litters for carrying patients. But it tells the story of the Naval Hospital, which is again on the far eastern side of the Yard. Established in 1838, operated up until 1948, and again was an important center of innovation. Our tours are really all about making past-present connections, and I always love when we find sort of new important milestones and breakthroughs that were made here at the Yard that we can connect to the present day. Here we can see one of those important figures, and that was Edward Robinson Squibb, who devised the first effective anesthetics and went on to found Squibb Pharmaceuticals, which is now part of Bristol Myers Squibb. And so he worked and did a lot of his research at the Naval Hospital. We were talking before, and we'll talk about in just a second when we go up to the third floor, about the role of women at the Yard, which, you know, we celebrate women here during World War II, but women have been here a lot longer than that, working in various jobs, making uniforms, making flags, and starting in the early 20th century, the Nursing Corps arrived here, the Navy Nursing Corps, which was established in 1908, and one of the first cohorts actually came here to work at the Naval Hospital. So when you come to the museum, I encourage folks to check out this little corner right here. I also want to mention this one right here. One of the most incredible oral histories that we have here is of Robert Hammond, who was one of the first African Americans to become a medical corpsman, which is basically a medic in the Navy. He did an oral history in 2010 that is so evocative. It's one of my favorite oral histories to listen to, but also, you know, he really describes the incredible just rank racism that he experienced while working here and throughout his experience in the Navy. And also, he was here 10 years ago. So there you can see Cindy with Robert. He came for the opening. And on the right, you can see a local resident, Beatrice Mobley, who also came, and she worked in the hospital as well, starting in 1945. Both of them were born in 1926, and both of them are still with us. Fingers crossed. So yeah, so again, a great example of kind of this project, bringing all these people out of the woodwork to share their stories and document those stories to help, you know, inform the programs and exhibits here. And that continues, although unfortunately we have fewer and fewer people who are still around from the World War II era. But now we're really trying to get people who are here in the 50s, 60s, and even in the post-Navy period in the 70s and beyond to share their stories and document them with the archive. Yeah. All right. So now we're going to head upstairs and we're going to go to the third floor. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of the exhibit, Cindy and Doug.
That's true, and I'm actually I noticed a interesting brickwork on the wall that I'll come back and take a look at, a little archway.
Oh yeah, you can see where there used to be a window right there.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. Okay. And so the third floor through here is also where the employment center is located, on the other side of the floor. And so this is dedicated to basically World War II and post-World War II. And this is one of our most valuable artifacts, which is a piece of the USS Arizona, as I mentioned before, was built here at the Yard in 1916. The eagles, we can see the eagles.
Oh yeah, awesome. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, here we can see this iconic photo showing women leaving work. There was a big multi-page spread in the New York Times when women started working at the Yard. And so that's where this photo comes from. You can see those eagles were still there. And you can see all the men lined up along the sides there, watching as the women walk out the Sand Street Gate. And you can also see on the left-hand side, the US Marines who guarded the Yard for much of its history. I'll just give a shout out. Yesterday was the Marine Corps' birthday. And of course, we are in a building that was built for the US Marine Corps. And actually the last resident was also a member of the US Marines. Speaking of people coming out of the woodwork, several years ago, some folks, they kind of walked into the museum and they were like, hey, we used to live here. And it turns out that they actually lived here up until 1975. And they were the last residents here. After that, basically all the personnel moved out. The Marines completely left the Navy Yard in 1975. And here Paul and Barbara Fields, when they came and visited the Yard, and they did an oral history. Yeah, maybe we can play that, Cindy.
I was a United States Marine, and I was stationed at the old Marine barracks across the street as part of the Naval Station. So I got here late 1972, and I lived in the BOQ down the street on Flushing Ave. And Barbara and I were engaged. She came into New York. We got married out at St. Albans Naval Hospital, the same place she was born, on August 22nd, I'm sorry.
Yeah, don't give my birthday. We were married out at St. Albans Chapel on June 23rd, 1973. So I came and joined Paul here. We were married. And
yeah, and so we asked about, government quarters to live in, and there was stuff out at Fort Totten. I just didn't feel like making that kind of drive. So they said there was a set of quarters available on the shipyard, but it was huge, and they were unable to find anybody to take it. And we didn't even need to see it. We said, we'll take it. So we moved in, and there was no furniture whatsoever, so they took us down by the BOQ on the other end of Flushing Ave, where they had the warehouse. So they just said, walk through, tell us what you want. And there was one section that had the furniture for the admirals, and they said, we couldn't have any of that, but we could take anything else we wanted. So we picked this, that, and the other thing, and they delivered it. So they brought it down here, and Building 92 was our home until we deactivated the Marine Barracks in 1974, and I had orders down to Quantico, Virginia. So we were here for probably a year and a half, something like that. But that's how I got here, and that's how she got here. I came on orders, and she came to get married.
Who knows if we ever would have found that story if it weren't for having this museum, having the tour program, and giving people a place to come and share. And so that's really what this is about from a historical standpoint. Is you think about public programs, whether it's exhibits or tours or lectures and things like that, is really a living thing that's sort of mutually creative between both the audience and the presentation, whatever that might be. And so that's the way that we look at things, and the way that this was designed was to bring people in and have them share their story and share their connections, to build these networks and build those stories that have grown so much over time. And I know I've learned so much from the visitors that have come to the museum and come on the tours over the years. So yeah.
And Andrew, there's also, we have someone who's watching who brought in the fact that I mentioned that the Rapelier family, some people have connections that go way back.
Way back, yep.
And so we have someone here who said, you might want to mention the land for the hospital had a connection to some of these early European settlers.
It's funny that someone mentions that, because just the other day, I gave a tour to folks from the Belgian consulate, specifically representing Wallonia, the French-speaking part of Belgium. And we brought them to the Navy Yard because so much of this area was settled. The first European settlers here were from Wallonia, including especially on the east side of the yard. The land that is today the Naval Hospital was founded by Rapelier. And then we also had the Montfort family, which was another Walloon family. Yeah, so it goes way back. Even some of this land was originally settled by an Italian, Peter Caesar, and as well as Dutch. So it was pretty cosmopolitan. But I know we're just about out of time. But there is one other thing I want to show you here up on the third floor. And Ken makes an important point. I should just add a caveat, and I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, but Building 92 is not currently open to the public. So we take people in as part of our tours, but due to the fact that there is a COVID-19 testing center for the yard that's on the first floor, that it's not currently open, but we do hope that it will open sometime in the near future. And stay tuned, and we will let you know as soon as we're able to reopen again. But we are opening up the exhibits for tours give people a chance to at least see part of it. Yeah.
Yes, and Carly oversees the programs and exhibitions, and during the pandemic has done so much to create exhibitions online, and then also outside and in public spaces that people can visit. So during the pandemic, they even had artists install their works of artists from the art install their works of art in Building 77, which is at 141 Flushing Avenue. Right now, there's an online exhibition where you can actually purchase art called Small Works for Big Change. So she's done so much to and her team to bring a lot of that programming out into the outdoors and into public spaces that people can visit and enjoy.
And you can learn so much about the yard. And there's probably as much text and images along the fence of the yard as there are inside this exhibit. So this was unveiled this summer, but there's a half-mile long exhibit along the fence on Flushing Avenue. It's now dark outside thanks to daylight saving. So otherwise I would take you downstairs and show you. But really, really tremendous. It highlights more than 150 different, businesses, community groups, partners, and really ties the yard together into, sort of different communities of practice, initiatives, and programs. It's really, really tremendous. So if you have a chance, if you're shopping at the Wegmans, take a walk down Flushing Avenue and follow along those. It's really a tremendous work and a way to kind of demystify the yard. That was also, part of the purpose of making Building 92 was to sort of share what was going on behind the fence, because for many people it was kind of a mystery. But I wanted to kind of end with this thing right here, end where we started. So I mentioned before that the plaque of the commemorating those who were killed in the Constellation fire disappeared. And so the Alumni Association came forward and said they wanted to recreate it, which they did. And then someone called up our former executive director, Eileen Trumard, who is now, here she is right there. Like so many people who have graduated from the Navy Yard, has gone on to do tremendous things. She was at Snug Harbor, and now she is the director of the National Building Museum down in Washington, D.C. But anyway, so she got a call and some guy said, oh yeah, that plaque, I have it in my basement. This is the plaque, and it's now here on display. So this is the original. Yeah, Mr. Durso, as Kina mentions. But now it's in a safe place, and it's on display for the folks to see. And I know it's hard to remember what the plaque looked like at the very beginning of the tour, but there was an important change that was made to it. So if you see along the top here, this bas relief, which shows the Williamsburg Bridge and the Hammerhead Crane. This is based on a photo, and the original photo actually had workers sitting down here. And so when they recreated the plaque, they decided to put the workers back into the image. And so I think that was a really nice touch, since this is all really about the workers. So I can show you a little bit closer. So there are no workers in this image, but the plaque that's downstairs
Andrew, if
does
you
have
go
them.
back to where you were with your if you go back to where you were with your camera, there's a name, Anthony Gambaro, and I remember that Anthony Gambaro Jr. came on one of my tours many years ago.
Yeah,
one of the descendants of the deceased that was not only there on the unveiling of the replica plaque, or the second generation plaque, but also subsequently on tours. It's been really a great thing to welcome those individuals. Yeah.
I mean, just thinking about the people that have come through these doors, and we've had the opportunity to meet. I also think all the time about the program that we did with Daniela and Meredith Wisner, who was the archivist at the time, with alumni from the Pratt Institute co-op program. So this was the class of 1964. Pratt students who worked part-time in the Navy Yard and attended Pratt and they were all here during the Constellation fire. And so we did a oral history program with them as well. And those stories are now in the archives. So there's way too many stories to name, but we're just so grateful to have this, to have this place to bring people and share stories of the yard and continue to collect those stories.
Yeah, and I wanted to share too. There's there's so many people, but in those early days, I remember Elliot Matz, who oversaw operations at the yard for many years, had a real passion for this project. And I remember him sitting in on a lot of those oral histories. And then for the one that we did with the Pratt engineering program, we did a tour first to spark everybody's memories. And then we split out into rooms across the museum where we were able to sit down and record whatever people could remember and share, which is now part of the archive. And so it's just, it's been an ongoing effort to try to capture and document some of those stories. And it's something I'm really proud of, and has been one of the most rewarding parts, I think, of our work.
Yeah, and I thought it would be appropriate to end with this. So this was the team at the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation at the time when Building 92 opened. Many of those people are still here, but many new faces have joined the Navy Yard team, and we're just so thankful to all the people, past and present at the NYDC who have made the Brooklyn Navy Yard what it is. When we look at the Navy Yard today, it gets a lot of press, a lot of attention, and rightly so, because of the great success of helping, grow businesses and create good jobs at the yard. But what you're seeing is the product of 25 years of hard work by many, many people. So basically a generation of people that have come through the yard and helped make it what it is today. So we want to acknowledge all those people past and present at the yard who have been part of that, and the people in the future who will continue to grow the yard and be part of its story moving forward. So, well, thank you all so much. Thank you to Cindy and Doug for having this conversation with me. Thank you to everybody who joined us, and especially our BNYDC partners, Kina, Elizabeth, anybody else I missed from BNYDC who was with us. So thank you so much. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll follow up. If you missed any part of this, we'll follow up with a recording that you can watch. And come join us at the yard, even if it's to come on a tour or if it's just to stop into Building 77. And, thank you as well to all the people who've contributed, whether it's, personal effects, have contributed, things from their family, have contributed oral histories and their stories to the collections here at the yard. And you can see some of those people here. It's been such an honor for me, and I just wanted to end on this on Veterans Day, to have the opportunity to interview so many veterans, many of whom are not with us anymore, but we're so thankful to have their stories documented. So for me, that's been one of the most rewarding parts of this work over the last 12 years that I've been involved. So yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank you, Andrew. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.